What is something that instantly killed the crush you had on someone? I was casually dating this guy, as in we've only been on a few dates so far, back in college. He was educated, had a good job in his own place, was polite, all that jazz. Basically, no immediate red flags. One day, he wanted me to come over for a casual pizza night at his place. I had just finished up a 12+ hour long day due to my scheduling combination of nonstop classes and a part-time job. I was exhausted, to say the least, and did not feel like spending nearly an hour doing my hair and makeup to get all dolled up for such a casual date. I texted him something along the lines of, "I had a long day, can we keep it casual tonight? I hope you're okay with yoga pants and a hoodie." He responded with, "Actually, no, that's not okay. When you're spending time with me, you should always make a full effort to look your absolute best." Then, he started trying to tell me what to wear, something along the lines of, "Why don't you put on a pretty dress and some heels, do your hair and makeup, make yourself look nice for me?" It was one of the weirdest conversations I've ever had. After he made the dress comment, I simply stopped responding. I never spoke to him again. He kept on texting me for a while, asking what was wrong and why I had just disappeared. I honestly don't think he realized what he said was so off-putting. I'm definitely glad that happened early on and I dodged a huge red flag. I guess I just have really bad luck with guys though. After college, I was with a dude very seriously for a couple of years. It was slow at first, but he started by suggesting what to wear and it went to him full on picking out my outfits every day to match and color code to his, including accessories. I normally don't give a crap what I wear, and matching with him when we go out made sense in my mind, so I didn't think it was a big deal. He turned into the most controlling and abusive man I have ever met. It lasted until he punched me so hard in the face that I went flying into an aquarium and broke that, got cut by the glass, and had my nose broken. It was all over a scarf. Our pet rat had dragged it into his cage to make a soft little bed and he thought I put it in there to be mean to him. People that made a deal with a friend that if they weren't married by a certain age they would marry. How did it go? We met in college, and were instant best friends. I was 20, she was 18. We spent all our time together, and were briefly lovers, but we never formally dated because both of us were very much into being wild and free and enjoying our youth. We dated other people on and off, but we talked about it and agreed that a committed relationship between the two of us would be an all or nothing kind of thing. Since neither of us wanted to give up our hedonistic, promiscuous, irresponsible lifestyle, we made a point of not committing to a relationship. A few years went by that way, and we were very happy, right up until her sisters died. It was a car accident. They were 16 and 18, and both were killed in the crash, dead on arrival at the hospital. My friend was utterly, completely devastated. It still hurts me to remember it, even now. Her father, though, was even more devastated, to the point where he was legitimately willing to let himself starve to death rather than try to go on living. She moved home, out of state, to take care of him. She cut ties with everyone for a while, even me. I didn't see her again for 2 years. She was so different after that. Before the accident, she'd always been the most joyful, exuberant, positive person I'd ever met. After she came back, she was quieter, sadder, maybe wiser. I wanted to be there for her more than I'd ever wanted anything in the world. Not being able to fix things for her, not being able to make it better, that hurt more than anything I could ever remember. I guess that's when I realized how in love with her I was. I told her that I loved her, that I wanted to be there with her, and she told me that she couldn't handle the idea of any kind of emotional connection for a while. Maybe a few years, she said. Maybe never. Maybe she'd never be able to open up emotionally again. She said she needed space from me, particularly from me. She said she needed to figure out what it meant to be alive in a world where her sisters were gone. She asked me to give her time, and I told her that I'd give her anything she wanted. She told me that she'd never been happier than she was when we were together. I told her the same. I told her that I understood, and that's when we made our pact. I was 25 then, and she was 23. We agreed, if she turned 30 and I turned 32, and if she had learned to heal, and if she hadn't fallen in love with someone else, and if I hadn't fallen in love with someone else, then we'd get married. So that's how we parted ways. She moved to Wyoming, to be alone. I moved to Germany, to get as far away from her as I could. We didn't keep in touch at first, but over the next few years we built up a correspondence. We wrote letters because we both liked writing letters. We emailed now and then. Sometimes we'd mail each other books that we thought the other would like. Years went on, and we became closer and closer. When I turned 30, I half-jokingly brought up our marriage pact. I told her that I hadn't ever fallen for anyone else. She replied that she was still very serious about our agreement, and that she'd never fallen in love with anyone else either. I asked her if she thought she had begun to heal, and she said she had, as much as a person could ever heal from something like that. A year later, she told me she'd like us to meet and spend some time together, to see if the spark was still there. It was. She was living in California at that time, and I found a job there. I'd always wanted to live in California anyway. I proposed to her 6 months later, and she smiled and told me no fair, that I had to wait another few months, when she'd be turning 30. I thought it was silly, but at that point things were going so well that a few months didn't seem like they could matter at all. But I'm crying now, so I'll have to wrap this up quickly. She was hit by a drunk driver and spent 2 days in the ICU before her body gave out. She died. That's how the story ends. What's the worst thing you've seen a family member do, but have kept quiet about? One day I was walking by my parents' room when I noticed that the door was open. This was a little weird, so I peeked in and saw my dad on his computer. He was viewing screenshots of different news anchors' body parts. Nothing outrageous, just their thighs mostly. But there was an insane amount of this. I don't know what site or platform my dad was on, but he kept clicking and the images of thighs in tight clothing just kept popping up. Here's the kicker. My mom doesn't have legs. She was in a terrible car accident a few years ago, and she now gets around in a wheelchair. I wasn't sure if my mother knew about my dad's strange obsession or not, but I quickly noped out of that room and went somewhere else. A few days later, I came home reeking of a certain recreational plant when my father stopped me from entering the house. He's always been a very strict dude, with a military background to boot. I knew what he was going to tell me because he'd said it before, that I was not allowed back into his roof smelling like this. I needed to find some other sorry place to take a shower, and only then could I return. He started his little tirade with the question, "What is this?" Though, and I couldn't resist taking the bait. "Well, I can tell you that it's not a Google search of your favorite news anchor's thighs," I said snappily, definitely still buzzed. I never would have said that in my conscious mind, but, as soon as I said that, there was a little bit of dead silence. Then, my stone-faced father turned around, walked back into the house. I went inside and took a shower, and neither of us have ever spoken about it since. Has anyone ever called off the marriage on their wedding day? Me. I called off my wedding on the spot and had my grandparents marry instead. My dad is my stepfather, but I view him as my only dad. I've never seen my biological father, and he never paid child support either. My stepdad provided for my education, bought me a car and a house and taught me how to navigate life. When I turned 18, I changed my last name to his. And most people don't even realize that he's my stepdad. After dating my ex-boyfriend for 6 months, I finally told him about my dad, and he didn't seem to mind. Later, when we discussed marriage, I mentioned it briefly, and my ex-boyfriend's parents said it didn't matter, either. They considered it a matter of the previous generation, and as long as we were happy, it was fine. When planning, we already arranged for my dad to walk me down the aisle. However, my biological father suddenly appeared, and it turned out that my ex-boyfriend's dad was his classmate and told him. I have no idea what was going through my ex-boyfriend's dad's mind, but he believed both fathers should attend the wedding together. He tried to convince me and my parents. My dad thought it would be too awkward to spoil such a joyous occasion, so he persuaded me to agree. I thought it was ridiculous and unreasonable. But since everyone said it was okay, I went along. Later, during the rehearsal, everything was arranged with my dad in mind: speeches, walking down the aisle, and the main table for the in-laws. But on the wedding day, the hotel arrangements were changed. My ex-boyfriend's dad informed me that these elements were cancelled because, after all, my biological father was my true father. I asked my ex-boyfriend if he knew about it and what he meant. He said his dad had a point. I asked him if this was a show of force or moral coercion. He said it was about considering the dignity of both families and not causing a scene on such a joyous day. I told him I only had one father, and it's the one I shared a last name with, and told him we didn't need to get married anymore. I took the microphone and went, "Dear friends and family, thank you for taking time out of your busy schedules to attend the pre-engagement ceremony of me and someone." Why do I say it's a pre-engagement ceremony? Because this marriage isn't happening. Please adjust the lighting to shine on the man wearing a cheap suit at the second table on the groom's side. This is the biological provider who disappeared for over 20 years. Did your cheap suit give you the cheap confidence to attend my ceremony? How dare you show your face? I haven't even used your surname, so what makes you think you can override my parents and control the situation? Do you know your place? Your repeated idiocy is simply unbearable. My parents raised and took care of me for over 20 years. They devoted themselves to nurturing me, and today was supposed to be my most important day. Why can't I walk down the aisle? Why can't I make a speech? Why do we have to embarrass ourselves by having two unrelated individuals on stage, making a spectacle of us? Now, all the elders from the groom's side, who can give me a clear answer? Are you trying to show dominance over me or my family? Are you morally blackmailing me or my entire family? Are you trying to extinguish our lineage? Are you insatiable or just mentally deranged? So, please understand that this marriage won't happen. I also ask everyone to bear witness. The groom's family provided 66,000 yuan in cash and a pair of gold bracelets, all inside the auspicious wedding basin. My family has never touched them. We have cameras throughout the entire process, both at the venue and the hotel, to avoid future disputes. Could the host please bring a counterfeit money detector? I believe the hotel should have one. Also, this reception is paid for by my parents, so we won't entertain the groom's relatives. After all, we're not familiar with each other, and it's impolite to attend someone's wedding and expect to receive gifts. It's a bit shameless. The groom's family's gifts will be deposited directly into the groom's account. We have surveillance cameras at the entrance, and we can review any issues at any time. Alright, you can leave now. We'll have a few strong young men on our side to maintain order as you exit. Everyone followed along. Afterwards, my ex-boyfriend and his family came to apologize. His mother scolded his father, and his father said he sympathized with my biological father, as they were classmates. He even gave my biological father a red envelope with $500 after. I firmly called off the wedding and engagement. No one could change my mind. My grandpa and grandma wore matching suits, and since they never had a wedding ceremony, we figured this would be a good time. My wedding dress was taken off and given to my grandma. And the princess dress I wore for the reception went to my aunt. My aunt and uncle acted as flower children for my grandparents and had a great time. After eating and getting tipsy, my grandpa and grandma started taking turns with a literary performance. With the lights and disco music, we didn't waste anything, and it was still an amazing day to remember and celebrate. What is your biggest rated R mess up in the bedroom? Last night my girlfriend decided to talk dirty during intimacy. It was a breakthrough for us in the bedroom. My girlfriend has been insecure about talking in the bedroom since the beginning of our relationship because she's not fluent in English. She usually avoids saying anything mid-deed other than mumbling, which I appreciate too, but I've always wanted to hear her say something hot in the heat of the moment, even if she said something nasty in her native language. I never put pressure on her to do anything that made her uncomfortable, but I did tell her how much I would enjoy hearing things come out of her mouth when we sleep together. She didn't budge though. The thought of talking made her cringe. I eventually accepted the fact that she was obviously not the talking dirty type, which was okay. However, last night happened. My girlfriend came home from an office party and I could tell she was tipsy. She hugged me and said she was prepared to talk dirty if I promised not to laugh. I instantly promised not to laugh. Cue foreplay. I was going down on her when she said she wanted me to reach home base. Sweet. Good opening line for an inexperienced talker. I was impressed. Mid-deed, she kissed me and said, "You're within me now." I asked if she liked it. She nodded and said, "You're so far within me now." I was struggling not to break my promise and burst out laughing when I realized she was recycling the same line. When I went to go down again, I said I love the taste. She said, "Cool, thank you. Now work on me like I was a horse in the field and treat me like a saddle." I was afraid she was going to catch me trying not to laugh. My girlfriend said, "I can feel you behind my belly button." At that moment, I lost it and laughed. My girlfriend had no idea what was so funny about what she said. I apologized for laughing and said it was the most unique talk I've ever heard and that I loved her even more for giving me that experience. Nothing I said made her less upset about me laughing though. Based on her body language, I'm gonna have to do a lot of exceptionally good boyfriend things before I see her unclothed again.
What's the most repulsive thing someone has done on a date with you? I met a guy on Tinder who seemed nice and fairly attractive at first. My first impression was that he seemed a little vanilla. He didn't drink or smoke, and wanted to be a meteorologist. He was super close with his grandfather, gentlemanly and family-oriented. All green flags so far. We ended up going to Starbucks and talked for a couple hours. It was nice, so I set up another date. We went for ice cream this time and again talked for a while. We were sitting outside talking about physical attractions. I mentioned how men are attracted to prominent parts in women, while girls tend to gravitate towards odd features like calves and such. All of a sudden, he gets really weird and says, "I don't know if I should tell you this." So of course I prod him until he tells me. This ends up being my tragic mistake. First, he confesses to having a foot fetish. Whatever. That's not super strange. Then he asked if I have ever heard of a crush fetish. He tells me not to Google it because it'll freak me out. There are 2 levels of a crush fetish. Level 1 involves becoming aroused watching someone crush invertebrate animals under their feet, like bugs. Level 2 involves watching someone crush vertebrate animals like bunnies or kittens. WTF. Excuse me? Instantly, something he'd said on our previous date popped into my head. We had a conversation on the first date about how I had been getting a lot more bugs in my room that summer and so I'd been squishing bugs all day. I brought up this conversation from the last date and he confessed that it really got him going. Trying not to throw up, I smiled and continued on. "What kind of shoes do you typically wear?" "Oh, well, right now I have my moccasins on. Do you mind if I smell them?" I'd love nothing more than to smell some sweaty moccasins. That was it. At that point, I was starting to plan my escape in my head when I felt something touch my ankle. I hadn't noticed that today he came to our date with sandals. Well, now they were off and he was playing footsies with me and trying to get his big toe into my sock. Now I'm not sure if this was his attempt at seducing me, but I got up and walked straight out the door. Over the next few months, he texted me 4 or 5 times asking me for my help and that he'd pay me to let him do stuff with my feet. I haven't blocked the number just in case I ever find myself in need of some quick cash.
The most embarrassing I sent the wrong photo incident. This was a few years ago, when the live photo just came out. I was at a wedding in May when one of my good friends from college pulled me aside to show me a video. Apparently, the bride of the wedding decided to take a photo of her new engagement ring on her hand when they had just got engaged last year. A typical view of looking down on this big old ring in her hand in space girly type nonsense. After taking the photo, she sent it to her entire extended family in a group text and to a bunch of her friends as well. What the poor girl didn't realize was that she had actually taken a live photo on her brand new iPhone. While initially, the photo was of her ring in hand, the extended cut revealed her now fiancé walking up in the background completely nude. Not a single piece of cloth on the man. But that's not even the funny part. He had a raging erection. That thing looked so hard it could probably drill through the earth. But that's not even the most hilarious part. The jokester is crab walking. No, not walking. He was crab running towards his new fiancée. So he was butt naked, hard, and crab running. Well, this extended version gets sent out to at least 40 people. To grandma, uncle, aunt, cousins, friends from high school, and friends from college. Essentially everyone with any know-how of a phone quickly figures out what exactly is being provided in this marriage. The poor girl figures out what happened the next morning when her phone blows up, but the damage is already done. During the entire wedding, I could not look at the groom in the face because I would break down laughing. I wondered if everyone else that's seen the video was also thinking the same thing. That video lives rent-free in my head now, and I think of him like that every time I see him.